Presidential elections in the United States are decided when one candidate has been awarded at least 270 out of 538 votes. This is Data Skeptic Consensus, the 8th installment in our series about how multi-agent systems achieve collective decision-making. For better or for worse, the Electoral College is our system. There's no voting method that is intrinsically right or wrong. The best mathematics can do to help us is to talk about desirable properties a voting system might have. Today on the show, Pat Rosenstiel joins us to help explore how the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact proposes a novel alteration to the process.
Pat Rosenstiel, and for the purpose of this conversation, I'm senior consultant to National Popular Vote, which is an organization dedicated to enacting the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact and changing the way we elect the President of the United States in a bipartisan way.
Well, let's maybe start with the top-level question for people who haven't yet heard of the National Popular Vote. What is it, and how does it differ from the baseline voting system we use today?
Yeah, right now, when we elect the president of the United States, we basically elect the president of the battleground states. So we operate under a state-based winner-take-all system. What National Popular Vote does is it uses the power in the Constitution for the legislature to award electors, to ask the various states if they want to award their electors on the basis of the National Popular Vote. So how our agreement works, it's an interstate compact. Anytime there are 270 electoral votes in the agreement, those states agree to their electors to the candidate who wins the most popular votes in all 50 states, and the District of Columbia, which does a few things, right? It guarantees the presidency to the National Popular Vote winner, which we think is a good idea, forces the candidates to campaign to voters in all 50 states, and it kind of right-sizes the political influence of battleground state voters vis-a-vis the rest of us. So we think it addresses all the shortcomings of the current system. We think it's a good idea whose time has come.
Is it an idea that's compatible with some of the rules in place? I've heard lots of debates about bad faith electors and what they could or couldn't do legally, and I'm not really clear on what's possible. Is there some controversy around the idea, or is this just fall in line with the basic rules laid out?
Well, I think it falls in line constitutionally with what's permissible. Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors, right? And I think the courts have upheld and recently upheld in some of these faithless elector cases that states can award electors on the basis of the way that the legislature decides. So by having an interstate compact that goes into effect when states with 270 or more electoral votes are in the compact, that's fully consistent with the power of the legislature under the Constitution, does not require a constitutional amendment. And, we've been at this for a little while. We have states with 196 electoral votes that have our bill in place. So, when we have 74 more, we'll elect the president by national popular vote. And we hope to have that system in place and are cautiously optimistic that we can by the 2024 presidential election.
So when you know that there are 74 electoral votes necessary to really achieve that milestone, I would imagine when it's that calculated, you might have some ideas in mind about where to get them. Is there a path for how this might be achieved?
Yeah, there's a lot of different paths. I also like to point out that, we have 15 states in the District of Columbia that have passed our bill, right? That's the 196 electoral votes. But we've also passed one chamber or another in 9 other states with 88 electoral votes. So, we've got all kinds of different paths to 270 for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So, for example, some of the chambers that we passed are like the Arizona House of Representatives. We've passed the Oklahoma Senate. We passed the Senate in North Carolina, the House and Senate in Nevada. So there's just all kinds of different places. And I think one of the biggest fallacies out there is that this national popular vote for president is a Democrat or a Republican idea. Frankly, we have been building support in a bipartisan way. We're a movement of Republicans, Democrats, and independents who are tired of the influence that battleground state voters have in presidential elections. And we see it unfolding before our very eyes today. And we think we can get this done before the 2024 election.
Yeah, the whole idea seems very apolitical to me as I read up on the literature and the thoughts behind it. If I had to sum up in one word, it would be fairness, which I think everybody aspires to. How does that, my idea that this doesn't seem to align to either party compare to the support you see? Is it truly bipartisan or does it skew one way?
That's been my experience. Obviously, it's election reform. So anytime you're dealing with election reform, it sort of gets viewed sometimes through a political frame. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. But, even after the 2016 election, and I happen to be a Republican in Minnesota who supports a national popular vote for president, I could have easily put a Democrat or a progressive from Oregon on the program with you as well. But, just even a couple of years ago, Michigan Senate, after the last divergent election, right? Republican president wins without winning the popular vote. Our bill was introduced in the Michigan Senate, which is a Republican-controlled chamber. The bill was dropped with 15 Republican sponsors and 10 Democratic sponsors. By and large, they're just tired of a system where 4 out of 5 American voters, when we elect the president of the United States, are mere spectators in the process. And use the fairness word, I'll say that I believe one person, one vote is a foundational principle of American democracy and the republic. And so that's not a Republican or a Democrat idea. That's an American idea. And I think it's why we've had bipartisan support.
So one thing that's been consistent about our history and our short country is that we've always had peaceful transfer of leadership. I guess that's a low bar, but there are worse ways we could elect our leaders. What are some of the problems you see emerging that we can improve upon?
I kind of believe American democracy is the best experiment in government since the beginning of time. I mean, I think American democracy works pretty well, and I think a peaceful transition of power is an important part of that. I definitely think that national popular vote does a couple of things because it forces the candidates to campaign in all 50 states, and the current system doesn't do that, right? We're 2 weeks into the general election campaign, and every campaign event has been in 7 swing or battleground states. I just saw another story come down that this race is being whittled down to 6 battleground states or swing states. What I think national popular vote does is it forces the candidates to campaign to voters in all 50 states. It makes every American voter feel valued. They are valued under a national popular vote for president, no matter what state or zip code they live in. And when you feel like you're a valued voter, I think you can do a better job of living with the results. And sort of part of the real indictment of the current system is we have these false crises around the American presidency about whether they're legitimate or not legitimate. And frankly, the current president was elected legitimately under the state-based winner-take-all system. He campaigned to the interests of the battleground states. He won the election under the rules of the game. And so if you don't like the outcome, blame the system. And if you blame the system, we're not stuck with it because the founders have allowed the states to change it. And that's sort of what we're working on. So, I do believe when every voter in every state is politically relevant in every presidential election, that will continue to support this idea that we do have a peaceful transition of power, now that the American people pick the president and that the president speaks for the American people and all of the American people, not just the persuadable voters in battleground states.
Absolutely. It's hard to rewind time and do a counterfactual, but if this project had been in place, let's say since the beginning, can you speculate about, I don't know, how many elections may have gone the other way than they went?
Well, the truth is, I think every election would have gone a different way. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean it would be a different outcome. But what you find under the current state-based winner-take-all system, which was not the founder's system, that was adopted over time in the lead up to the Civil War. And I should say, I know more than most. The state-based winner-take-all system is 48 states right now in the District of Columbia award their electoral votes on the basis of who wins the popular vote of their states. That's not the Electoral College. It's how the states have chosen to use the Electoral College. That system wasn't even debated at the Constitutional Convention. It was adopted in the lead up to the Civil War as the North and the South wanted to consolidate the political power of their states in presidential elections, the political power of the leading parties in their states. Okay. I think if we have a national popular vote for president, every campaign would turn out differently because we'd have different incentives to campaign. So talk to my Democratic friends who say, I'm for a national popular vote because Hillary Clinton would have been president. I'm not sure that I agree with that because 96% of the presidential campaign in 2020 occurred in just 12 battleground states, right? Because that's where you needed to win the electors in order to get your path to 270. Under a national popular vote, voter in Bismarck, North Dakota matters as much as a voter in Boca Raton, Florida. The campaigns are going to get out there and campaign to all 50 states. And a Mountain West voter matters as much as a battleground state voter, or a voter in California matters as much as a voter in the American South, right? And so every campaign would be different because you would have party building activity going on in all 50 states. You would have engaged communities and political activists in all 50 states. Now we all export our political resources to a handful of battleground states. and who wins and loses those sort of predicates the outcome of the election. So could Donald Trump find 2.5 million votes against Hillary Clinton in a national popular vote election? Maybe, maybe not, but certainly the campaign would have been conducted differently, right? And that's the real merit of a national popular vote for president.
Thanks to this week's sponsor, Brilliant. The only thing I don't like about Brilliant is it makes me feel old. I would have learned much faster as a child if I had had access to Brilliant, because I know as an adult I can learn much faster. Their visual and interactive solutions to help teach you in their courses make learning a lot easier and also more fun. If you're a parent with kids, you've got to look at their courses to help supplement your stay-at-home teachings. And if you're an adult, there's advanced courses as well, or just catch up, fill in the things that maybe you missed. If you're not strong on linear algebra, Brilliant has some great solutions for you to catch up. Or if you need to get better at coding and logic, look no further than some of their algorithms courses. Their algorithms fundamentals is excellent. Very interactive, teaches you all the important aspects of computer science that you need to really get projects done. I'm so grateful to Brilliant, not just for their ongoing sponsorship, but for their continued development of content. I do come here on a regular basis and see what's new, and there's always something exciting. You should check out Brilliant and let them know we sent you by heading to brilliant.org/dataskeptic. Once more, that's brilliant.org/dataskeptic. If a listener likes the idea, how can they show support for it?
Well, the best thing they can do is go to nationalpopularvote.com, get themselves brushed up. But I mean, if they decided they want a national popular vote for president, this is the way to do it. And what they should do is go to our website. We got a cool right legislature function. I think a lot of people confuse a national popular vote for president. They should call your state legislator because it's the states that can make this change. And like I said, we have 15 states in the District of Columbia already with our law in place. They're waiting for states with 74 more electoral votes to join them. And so no matter where you live, even if you're in one of those 16 states that have adopted, use that right legislature function. The other way they can get involved, we have a PAC in Colorado called Yes on National Popular Vote. They can go to yesonnationalpopularvote.com. They can make a donation there. They can volunteer because there's a ballot measure in Colorado right now where we are yes on national popular vote. Those are a couple of great ways to get engaged today.
Is it realistic that the goal of getting all the remaining electoral count on board, that could be achieved and impact the 2020 election?
It cannot at this point. So the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact stipulates that anytime there are 270 electoral votes in the compact on July 20th of a presidential year, it triggers and then it's in place. And so 270 is a majority of the Electoral College. That's how we guarantee the presidency to the National Popular Vote winner. But we're at 196 now. We're past July 20th. So the next election, 2024, increasingly confident and believe we need to elect the president by national popular vote. Well, we shouldn't take 3 years off. This is a change that happens every year in legislative chambers. So if you're with us, get engaged, get involved. We need your help.
And I don't know if you're a betting person, but what do you suppose would be the odds we'd have this in place for 2024?
Yeah, I think they're real good. I think the current system's crumbling under its own weight. You know, the truth is like divergent elections create false crises around the American presidency. I think we're getting ready to watch another presidential campaign where voters in 4 out of 5 states are all but ignored, and that's Republican, Democrat, and independent voters. I think people are tired of the policy implications of the current system, that state-based winner-take-all system, where presidents get very transactional with battleground state voters. I know this is a data audience. I love the name of your podcast. So everybody who's listening knows how to use Google, right? Google Maine lobster fishermen and the presidential election. And right now, the commander-in-chief is sort of like pursuing policies around lobster fishermen in Maine just because Maine's 2nd congressional district happens to be a battleground state. So it's like these really parochial interests. You know, that's cute. That's interesting. But when it comes to $1 trillion prescription drug bills, right? Part of my truth. I was a Forbes guy in the primaries, but supported President Bush when he was president in enacting his domestic policy. We spent $1 trillion on free drugs for seniors called Prescription Drug Benefit Part D. And the reason that was our number one domestic policy agenda priority is because we needed to lock in the seniors of the I-4 corridor of Florida if we were going to win re-election. Now, don't get me wrong. There's always going to be issues in politics, but we shouldn't be spending $1 trillion to try to lock in a battleground state. The American elected president ought to think about what's in the best interest of all the American people. Where do my values align with theirs? Have a spirited campaign to all 50 states. Let the winner win, and then let's all get better at living with the results, right? I think it's as important today as it ever has been. And look, I always hear that the founders were afraid of the people. It's like the founding fathers were not afraid of the people. Madison himself said that a Republican form of government is a body of government that derives its power from the people. The American president should not be afraid of the American people, and we should elect a president of the United States, not a president of the battleground states.
Is there any strong argument or common arguments you hear against the proposal?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we hear arguments like all the time, most of them flawed. If you go to nationalpopularvote.com, and I think this section could be titled Objection Answer, but we call it Myth Fact, it raises a whole bunch of questions that we hear all over the place. One of the ones I hear all the time that makes me go nuts is that National Popular Vote, for example, is an end run on the Constitution. That's silly. I mean, all you have to do is open the document and read it. Article 2, Section 1, as a state powers conservative whose first dog's name was Jefferson. I agree, I probably need a hobby. The bottom line is you don't have to look too hard to figure out that each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors, is what the Constitution says about the Electoral College, right? So the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact uses that power to move to a national popular vote. That's an objection we hear from some of my friends on the right. And I'm like, look, I'm not a selective federalist. The power exists. We don't need a constitutional amendment to elect the president by national popular vote. Get on board so every conservative and liberal voter in the country can matter. And then let's see how many there are. Let's win campaigns. Another one is small states benefit from the current system. Well, first of all, that's silly. It's not true. It wasn't the purpose of the Electoral College. It was the purpose of the United States Senate. Every state will have 2 senators. Now, even if you believed that the Electoral College was protecting small states, it's doing a horrible job at doing that. And you guys are data guys, so I'll share with you some data. The 8 smallest states in this country in the 2008, 2012, and 2016 election had exactly 1 presidential visit, 1 campaign event in the general election campaign. They have 24 electoral votes and 5.9 million people. That's the 8 smallest states. 1 election event in 3 presidential elections or 12 years. Pick whatever you want. The battleground state of Wisconsin in that same period of time has 10 electoral votes, 5.7 million people, and got 40 campaign events in the general election campaign. So 1 state with 10 electoral votes is 40 times more relevant than 8 small states under the current system. And the reason they don't get the visits is because they're reliably Republican or reliably Democrat. They're North Dakota, South Dakota, and Alaska. They're Hawaii, Vermont, and Delaware. Those small states get totally jobbed, for lack of a better word, by the current system. Now, under a national popular vote for president, every voter in that state will matter in that national popular vote outcome, and candidates will be forced to campaign to the voters in all 50 states. Now, if that was just about where they kiss babies or buy television ads or anything like that, probably wouldn't be as passionate as I am about a national popular vote for president. But those campaign events are a proxy for political influence. And if you don't believe me, Google Maine lobster farmer or Maine lobster tariffs, or think about the idea that this country has been in a trade war for the last 4 years with China because the Trump administration, rightly, under the current system, was campaigning to the interest of Rust Belt state voters on tariffs and trade wars to try to bring jobs back. So, like, at the end of the day, these very parochial interests affect us all. And I just believe the solution to pollution is dilution. Let's dilute the power of the battleground states. Let's have a conversation about what's in the best interest of all the American people, no matter what state they live in. And let's set down our jerseys, get this reform done, then put them back on and have a campaign for president. I promise you I'll be with my candidate lining up to trying to beat the bad guys, not the bad guys, but the other side. I'm sure they're going to be doing their best job to take us on, but at least we all know that we're bringing a message to the American people they're choosing. And if we win or lose, we can do our best job governing, or we can get ready to come back at them next time. And that just seems like a good way to elect the president.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I want to make sure we talk about real quick is everybody talks about participation in American politics and how important it is. Like I've got friends in all 50 states that are in state legislatures, Republicans and Democrats, independents, progressives. Like I know a lot of political people and they all talk about participation and how important participation is in elections. MTV's got Rock the Vote. Conservative organizations have their own turnout vehicles too. What I want to make sure everybody knows is that the way we elect the president of the United States is killing turnout in America because you have these battleground state voters and you have these flyover states. Now, 4 out of 5 of us live in flyover states. But what's important to understand, if you go to U.S. Election Assistance Commission and their statistics on state-by-state turnout data, that's their job to report on that. In presidential year 2016, turnout's 11% higher in battleground states than it is in flyover states. In 2012, turnout on a state-by-state basis, 16% higher in battleground states than flyover states. And in 2008, 9% higher in battleground states than flyover states. So if we believe in the importance of voter participation in the democratic process is important to our republic, there's one systemic reform that can address the problem of decreased and lagging turnout in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and that's the national popular vote for president. Now, the reason that battleground states have higher turnout than flyover states is because battleground state voters believe their participation is meaningful. Now, I'm a Republican in Minnesota. That may be a battleground state this year for the first time in my life, and I'm not a young man. Like, we're the only state that voted for Walter Mondale. On election days in presidential years, I could have stayed home and cleaned my gutter, and my vote would have mattered as much as me turning out to the polls. Now, I vote. It's my civic duty. Really interested in down ballot races, think they make a meaningful difference. But this system, this state-based winner-take-all system, is killing turnout in American politics, and that has an impact on presidential races and down ballot races. So if you're interested in increasing participation, I think there's one reform to get your shoulder to the wheel on till it's done, and that's the national popular vote, Interstate Compact, and then get on to the next one. But at the end of the day, this will do more to increase participation, building strong party units, state, local, and county, and I think it's a very good idea that its time has come.
Thanks to this week's sponsor, Monday.com. As a data science consultant, I've been asked to work with a whole slew of different workflow tools, so I can tell you firsthand, Monday.com is best in class. It's easy to use, flexible, and a great visual teamwork platform. It's beautifully designed to manage any team, organization, or process online. You can customize it to fit your team's specific workflow. Over 100,000 teams are already on Monday.com. As Monday.com becomes the platform of choice for teams, there's a great opportunity emerging for entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs alike out there to get in at the front end of this. That's right, Monday is announcing the Monday Apps Challenge. It's an event bringing developers around the world together in order to compete to build apps that can improve the way teams work together on Monday.com. Have you ever dreamt of building an app that impacts the daily lives of hundreds of thousands of people? Well, now is your chance. And the prizes? They're insane. You've got to check out monday.com/dataskeptic to find out for yourself. If you're an ambitious person interested in the way you work, check out monday.com/dataskeptic to learn more about this challenge. Yeah, it's a very interesting proposal. I'm curious if you are aware of any scholarship on it. Have, mathematicians taken an interest in this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole body of work, primarily economists. I think the math problem that I've run into most on this thing is they say stuff like a vote in Wyoming is worth 1.67 electors. There's a guy named John Samples who's done, some math on that just because, your electors are, you get 2 U.S. senators and then you're guaranteed a House seat based on the U.S. Census. And so what he does is he takes the state of Wyoming and multiplies it by 3 electors and the population and says each elector represents a smaller portion of the population in Wyoming than in California that has 55 electors and much more population. Now, the problem with that is that John Samples knows nothing about well, I should be careful. Maybe he knows something about it, but clearly has no experience in presidential sort of politics and elections and how decisions get made. Clearly doesn't understand that a voter in Wyoming has exactly the same amount of influence as a voter in California under the current system, because anything times zero is zero. Wyoming, we know, is going to go for the Republicans, so nobody campaigns to them. They don't even get polled in presidential elections. There are 4 or 3 electoral votes, I believe, in Wyoming, might be 4. Nobody campaigns there because they're reliably Republican. And I would argue they have zero influence under the current system, because 4 electors or 3 electors times zero is zero. Same is true of California with its 55 electoral votes. Anything times zero is zero. And California is so reliably Democratic that the campaigns under the current system don't campaign there. Now, under national popular vote for president, you'd have to campaign to Wyoming and California and every other state. So all of those states win. So that's some data analysis that I think is flawed, because they don't take into effect, or maybe they don't buy my premise, that battleground state voters are ignored in presidential elections. But if they don't agree with my premise, I don't think they have the expertise to really comment on a subject like this either, because it's so obvious. Other things, we use data a lot in our argument. We'll hear stuff like, under a national popular vote for president, California and New York will make decisions for all of us and the rest of us won't matter. Talking about how they're so big. Well, look, just go do the demographic analysis, right? 12% of the voters live in California. 6% of the voters live in New York. Between the two of them, 18% of the voters. 82% don't live in those 2 states.
Little less than 1 in 5.
Yeah, right. And how are 18% of the voters going to dictate the terms to the rest of us? The truth is they're not, any more than like the Appalachian states that go heavily red, big time Republican, pretty much as many people as California, like the Appalachian states, and you come up through the Midwest a little bit, same number of people, same number of electors. They won't control the election any more than California will, because in a national popular vote for president, a voter anywhere is a voter that matters. So we do a lot of that data. Big cities are going to control everything. Okay, well, that's cool. Let's go to the Census Bureau. Rural voters are going to get ignored. Okay, that's cool. Let's go to the Census Bureau. When we do that, we figure out the 100 largest cities have 1/6 of the voters. That's the U.S. Census. That's not me making that up. That's true. They got 1/6 of the people, 1/6 of the voters. Well, if you go and look at the U.S. Census, voters outside of statistical metropolitan areas, which is the definition of a rural voter, 1/6 of the population. Now, why would the top 100 cities have more influence than rural voters? You're a data guy. 1/6 equals 1/6, right? That's still true. The only way I know to bring rural voters at parity with urban voters is to go to a national popular vote for president, because the most rural states under the current system are flyover states. You know, if I'm a data guy, and I am a data guy, digging into the data, figuring out the predicate. And at the end of the day, I think 2024, I guess I gave you a long-winded answer to a pretty short question. I feel good about our chances by 2024. Believe the current system's crumbling under its own weight. The reason I'm a proponent for a national popular vote is because I'm not afraid of our ideas. And frankly, I like our chances under a national popular vote for president.
Yeah, and there were 2 other interesting anecdotes in the media guide you guys send over. 24 states had no campaign events in 2016. I think we covered that one. And 12 of the 13 smallest are routinely ignored. So if you're one of those, it's not an insignificant point of the population. This directly affects how much the electors are paying attention to thoughts in your area. So it does seem like a very important national consideration.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at the 1960 election that came down to 160,000 votes, give or take. I guess I don't have that data right in front of me, but you can go look. I mean, think about the small states of Alaska and Hawaii under a national popular vote system where the popular vote is coming down to 160,000. Or think about 2000, the 2000 election where 350,000 popular votes separated Al Gore from George Bush. Now, of course, it was a different system. There would have been a different campaign. That number might have changed. But if you have a presidential election coming down to 320,000 votes, the entire lower 48, as they call it in Alaska, we're going to be doing get out the vote calls till we can't dial anymore in Alaska and Hawaii, because those 2 small states are going to determine the outcome of that presidential election. How much you win or lose Alaska and Hawaii. Now, if a Democratic candidate wins Ohio and Florida, East of the Mississippi, the campaign's over hours before the polls even close in California and west of the Mississippi, because you got that New England area and that Northeast area that's heavily Democratic. You got Ohio and Florida that go for the Democrat. The Republican needs to win Ohio or Florida to even have a path to 270. What kind of system is that? All of a sudden, you got plummeting turnout west of the Mississippi, which impacts every race down ballot. It's a disaster. It makes no sense.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about here. For listeners that want to read up on more details for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, where can they go online?
Yeah, I would say go to nationalpopularvote.com. We're an information portal. We don't traffic in rhetoric. Opponents of a national popular vote will do something like George Soros boo or something like that. Bottom line is we try to get people the information they need so that they can make a decision. And if you believe a national popular vote for president is the way to go, please write your legislator, make a contribution, sign up to volunteer. We'll plug you in. We need everybody's help.
For sure. Every vote should be equal. I think that's an easy principle to carry through. So thank you so much for coming on, Patrick, and sharing these ideas.
Happy to do it. Love your show.
That concludes this installment of Data Skeptic Consensus. Our guest today was Patrick Rosenstiel. Our theme song is Paradox by Odling. Claudia Armbruster is our associate producer. Vanessa Burciaga does guest coordination. And I've been your host, Kyle Polich.